It's
Yeah,
the iMac and usually the multimedia part is welcome.
I can hear you well, so no worries.
Okay, cool.
In principle, the three people who will be live is just the three of us. It means if she will not have. I mean, because
Elian?
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Sebastiano Toffaletti from the European Digital SME Alliance. We are again doing a live conversation today. We will be talking to a couple of very distinguished guests who will help us dig into the topic of smart cities, especially looking into what digital solutions are possible nowadays within the crisis, the COVID crisis. What is the role of IT, digital small and medium-sized enterprises? For what is the collaboration of these companies with the smart cities? What is happening in the different cities? What experiences we are learning from? So let me introduce, first of all, we have Devor Mersman from the Open and Agile Smart Cities, which is a network of cities in Europe which are open and agile, I would say. And Devor is the CEO. And then we have Bart Rousseau from the city of Ghent. Bart is the Chief Digitalization Officer of the city, so he's really the person who can tell us what is the experience of the city of Ghent, which is quite advanced as a smart city, what he has learned in this period, what is the city trying to do to cope with the crisis. Well, indeed, I will start by saying, of course, we are all in this COVID crisis. We're all working from home, so I suppose that our audience will be as well. We have indeed being in lockdown in Europe, in many cities, in many countries, most of them. The cities do have an important role to play because they are the first instance of the citizens. They are the first ones who are responsible to address the needs of the people and the companies as well in this lockdown, in this emergency situation. Many sectors have been gone through a very big disruption, not just the healthcare system, but of course also tourism, manufacturing, automotive, etc. In many countries, this is really being hit hard. So we need to look into short-term and long-term solutions to improve the life of the city and the citizens. Indeed, we have digital solutions that can make that possible. Many cities are quite advanced in that. We call these cities the smart cities. Some cities are a bit lagging behind. Today we have a quite advanced one, which is the city of Ghent, and we want to learn a little bit what is happening there and what the cities will probably be doing as well. As European Digital SME Alliance, we launched quite at the beginning of this crisis a campaign called Digital Solutions for the COVID crisis. And it is a campaign that nowadays collects more than 200 European IT companies, digital small and medium-sized enterprises, which offer their solutions, their digital solutions to address the crisis. These solutions go from smart working, telemedicine, but also artificial intelligence technologies, blockchain, even 3D printing, everything that is in the digital sphere, in the digital technologies, that is available out there to help the citizens, help the governments, help the businesses cope with the crisis. So let me maybe start with our guest from the city of Ghent, from one of the smart cities in Europe, Bart Rousseau, who's the Chief Digitalization Officer of the city. Maybe, Bart, you could, just introduce yourself, but also explain us a little bit what is the city doing in this COVID crisis. What have you learned in this crisis? How are you working with your own, digital solutions? What with your community to address the problems of the community and helping to solve these problems? Bart.
Yeah. Hi. Thank you for having us on board. First, a point of order. I'm the Chief Data Officer, not Digital Officer for the city of Ghent. That's somebody who's
I beg your pardon.
No. But just yeah. But I'm also speaking from the experiences and the stories I hear from other cities, because Ghent is also very active in the Eurocities network, and Ghent is also chairing the Council of Cities of OASC. So we can draw from a whole wide variety of experiences. So as a lot of people, the seriousness of the affair became real very sudden. So there was this long build-up. So, and I think for a lot of cities and people, this the urgency of preparation wasn't very clear. So it was like the crisis was there all of a sudden.
Well, you're talking about probably the beginning of March, I suppose,
yes,
or
yes,
something like this. Okay,
yes,
when this hit all of us with the
yes.
pandemic and so on.
Yeah, so it was very interesting to see how quick people changed their frame, how they were looking at this, and that from the hour zero almost, that digital was also part of the conversation. We need to embrace digital to form solutions. What I noticed in Ghent, and that the digital solution was very fast for the internal administration to allow people to work from home as much as possible, and everything that's going on there on bandwidth. To my positive surprise, that the telcos were also very convenient to allow for more bandwidth in the same price, so that they took up their social role as well. So that societal network didn't break down on price issues, for instance, or on bandwidth issues.
Right. So you had the first conversation with the telecom companies, right? The big telecom operators, and then I suppose you started also speaking to other smaller players, no?
Yes. Well, but the telcos, they were talking to the federal government, not the city government. So I think there we see how layered this government decision tree actually is. And the major decisions are being made, like which are the principles, which is the framework. But when we talk about the purview of the cities, we are facing 1,000 questions an hour. Because it's about what about people who are homeless? How do you respect social distancing, not in the emergency care, but more in the public health and social care? How to enforce certain things? Is our technology up to speed? And so on and so on. And then at the same time, because we're talking to a lot of people who are active in SMEs, there were a lot of very interesting ideas being put forward by SMEs, but we didn't have the organizational bandwidth or speed or priorities in those first weeks to tackle those, to screen all those ideas. Is this valid? Is this worthwhile? And so on, because we were full in crisis mode to see what needs to be maintained, what can be put forward in time. So it's for attention. Sorry?
Essential services first, I guess, and then you can think about anything else. So there's, of course, priorities before you can move on to the next ones. Yeah.
Yeah, but there we saw that what we had in place was a whole risk management strategy where we have all these things in place, and they become very useful at such times. So to summarize, I think where digital really was a leverage was within the organization, so that we allowed people to go to reach out and tackle the priorities. But the translation from digital solutions towards the public sphere, I think, and I see this in other cities as well, in those first stages, there we didn't see any big bang solutions.
Right, I see. Thank you very much, Bart. Maybe we can take the chance and start also talking to Devor Messman, who is the CEO of OASC, the Open and Agile Smart Cities. It's a network. It's an association of cities in Europe which are open and agile, and Endeavor is also a very good technical expert in the smart city solutions. So maybe Endeavor, you can tell us a little bit. First of all, what does your organization do as a network of smart cities? How do you help them, and what do you see your role, particularly in this COVID crisis?
Thanks, Sebastiano. So OSC, we've been at it, let's say, for the last 5 years, a little over. And we were founded out of the observation in many of the pioneer cities around Europe, like Helsinki, Manchester, Milan, Porto, Santander, Ghent, Antwerp, Eindhoven, and so forth. We saw that a lot of the initial projects that were being done, they were having trouble finding an economical footing in terms of the business model, because the amount of adaptation a solution would need in order to address the market of another city would be too high. So there was a problem of interoperability, and we saw back then also that this problem would scale up with the whole market, as it was scaling up at that time. And so we set out on this journey of building a minimal interoperability between the cities around the world. So we're not just in Europe, we're mainly in Europe, but we also have chapters in Japan, in Mexico, in Argentina. We're working on one in Canada, and so forth. So what we've done over the last 5 years is we've ran the largest, let's say, smart cities project in Europe called Synchronicity, which was about, I think, 60 million or so over 3 years, which really allowed us to find out what this minimal interoperable layer is between these cities. Out of that project, where we connected disparate infrastructures, IoT infrastructures, backends, and so forth, of 21 cities around Europe, including Helsinki, Milan, Porto, Santander, and all of these guys who were running into these problems. So the way we connected those is using minimal interoperability mechanisms. I won't go into too much detail, but essentially it's two APIs and a set of data models that allows you to connect any city to another city. We've taken that kind of approach, and now there is a consensus globally between the whole network of OSC, which is not just those 21 cities, but includes cities like from Tokyo to London, and large cities to very small ones. What we're doing there, or what we've been doing, is we've been building an addressable market. So of course it helps that cities can share their solutions, and they move from sharing best practices to actually sharing each other's stuff and generating the impact from one place at another place. But in the process, you create an addressable market. So one provider develops one thing for one city, and they can scale it up to 149 other cities. So that's the kind of the basic idea of what we've been doing. The focus of us was always on these things like, well, for cities, it kind of allows you to avoid more vendor lock-in. It allows you to harmonize and collaboratively procure. For companies, it reduces costs and so forth. And investability reduces risk for both parties and all that kind of stuff. But what we've seen now with the crisis is that this dimension of speed, of course, if you have an interoperable basis and you have a solution that works, it can serve and scale up through everything that's been built up over the years. So that's also the focus of what we've been doing now. So what we're doing now is trying to gather technologies that are have been deployed in a place somewhere already, so that cities can get proof points from the government in that place, whether it's a region or a city, and that it is at this stage, I think we need to go too fast. So the requirement of interoperability is more now one on transparency. What is needed from the city side to implement that solution? What are the data models and so forth? So what we do is we are amassing solutions that can then be scaled up through the 150 cities that we have, and then of course other cities that are kind of linked to us through, for example, the Intelligent Cities Challenge and so forth. So I think it's quite important. And as you see, I am the one that I do have my daughter with me.
I see. Very good, Deborah. Let me maybe ask a different question to Bart while you play with your daughter. Bart, so the chief data officer from the city of Ghent. So where do you see the city going? I mean, okay, of course you spoke about the crisis, you spoke about the addressing the emergency. So first of all, internally, in the administration, to be able to offer services to its citizens. But have you started thinking already after the crisis? Have you started thinking beyond where is this situation now teaching you something, and do you have any vision of what will happen after in terms of development of city itself?
Yeah. So we were at an interesting phase that when all this was breaking, that we were in the process of writing some digital policies where data is one part, IT is one part, and the governance and the co-creation and so on and so on. So, and then we noticed that how brittle the assumptions were, what we were going to do, and how fast everything can change. At the same time, while dealing with the different proposals from SMEs, the ideas that we were developing within the OASC network to use solutions elsewhere, we were facing, okay, why is this not possible? Why can't we move faster? So we also agreed that one of the things we need to do is use this as a great momentum, because this crisis was a magnifying glass for the existing opportunities and challenges. So you don't have to make a business case anymore, because now it's quite apparent why certain things are working or why certain things are not working. We need to document them, write them down, so we are not forgetting that. The second thing is, I think we need, as a collective of people who are working in making urban society better by using digital tools and working together, which are the major learnings that we took out from this crisis, so we can prepare for the next thing, or we can reassess the priorities. Is a priority a better user experience to buy online? Or is it, how can we use online platforms to support your local economy? And I think in rephrasing all of this, that we can find some new common ground to work together. And I think this is what's happening right now within a lot of cities, because, okay, we need to relaunch. And how will digital help?
Thank you very much, Bart. Maybe I'll move to Deborah while there's probably going to be, as we are all working from home, there's probably going to be some kids playing in your environment, because we were hearing some kids. We are all in this situation, and so it's just normal. Deborah, yeah, because we also mentioned the role that small and medium-sized enterprises, which are part of the local community of many cities. So do you think there is somewhere, in some cities, or perhaps even in Europe, some policy to connect the city administration with the IT companies, especially the SMEs, to create, a very good collaboration and make sure that not only the city acquires the services, the good digital services from its local SMEs, but also by doing so, this SME community, this ecosystem grows. This is obviously very important for Europe in terms of our own digital sovereignty, our own making sure that we have a digital ecosystem that can bring us forward. So I don't know if you have seen any best practices in this regard, or if you have any ideas yourself as a network of cities. Because of course, I mean, we all understand that city is a big organization, and as such, it will, as government, they will naturally, many of them will tend to speak only to the very, very big companies. When you have, a global company offering IP solutions, of course, they will offer the A to Z service to the city. So for the administration, it's obviously much easier to go to the very big company. But then, as you know very well, we also have, in that case, we also take risks, because the city, for instance, risks to get a lock-in with one single provider and not be able to, improve or switch provider in the future, negotiate prices, and so on. So what is your views about the relationship between, the SMEs and the cities?
I think if you look at the landscape that we see globally, it's very diverse. So you have cities indeed who just make deals with big corporations who offer it as a package. You have we have cities who really try to focus on startups, on SMEs, and have all kinds of mechanisms and so forth in place. I think Ghent is a good one there, Antwerp with their, or actually Digipolis and then the Buy from Startups program. You have Aarhus who have, they have a mix where they have one part of the city is working with Microsoft as a solid, let's say, provider of all kinds of functionality for the city. And another part of the city is developing its own kind of open source system, even, or almost a city operating system in open source. So you can also mix it up. So I think in terms of what the landscape looks like, it's very diverse, and it really depends on when cities have started to embark on this path of digital transformation. It will also inspire the way the philosophies around it, because of course if you started 10 years ago, you've started from a different capability landscape than when you start now. So I think that's important to note, that it's quite diverse, and there is something needed also where this is brought to bear. It's currently today quite opaque in terms of what is the city doing, and what have they done, and what has been useful, what impact has something really generated, who is active where, and so forth and so forth. So that's an effort we try to make now with OASC. Is we're supposed to actually launch it at the end of June. The OASC catalog, we're moving that a bit ahead due to the COVID crisis, and slapping a beta tag on it as well. So if you run into any bugs, we've moved up the schedule. But it's basically, you have a city deploys solutions, and the solution can consist of one or more kind of products and so forth that support it. And most importantly, it also indicates any standards that are being used, the data models it's using, and so forth. So that kind of gives this transparent overview. It's something that needs to be built, but it's something the cities really need. It comes back in any conversation that we have with cities. Just a moment.
Let me just switch to Bart, perhaps, while Devor takes care of your daughter. Bart, in fact, I think it's very interesting because Devor was really touching upon concepts like interoperability, standards, transparency, etc. Because indeed, this is all about basically creating an open ecosystem, where the city can really choose different providers, improve services, and have a constant innovation on the services. But going back to the SMEs, because this is very much connected, the small and medium-sized enterprises. So what is the experience of Ghent in working with your own SME community there? Do you have any takeaways, any lessons learned so far, or any vision for the future in this collaboration?
There's a lot of visions, and one of the things, this is beyond my purview, but I think what we were facing is that there were a lot of good ideas, but we also noticed that during this crisis, we didn't have the organizational bandwidth or time to follow the standard procurement for those great ideas, because yeah, we were focusing on crisis management. I think that's one. We need to realize that as a city, we are not always able to move as fast as we would like to.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we saw that some SMEs companies started working autonomously and say, okay, this is a need and we're going to do this. So, okay, which is great. For instance, have these online platforms so that even if the shops were closed, you could buy some token that you can spend later and so on. So this is great, which means that there are different questions coming to the cities. How will you manage, or do you need to manage all those independent initiatives? That's one. I think another one is, okay, when we talk about interoperability and standards, how can we communicate that these are the standards or the interoperability guidelines that we are putting forward as central in our policy? And how will SMEs be convinced that these are the standards they need to follow?
Yeah,
Because
this is a very good question, I think, for the
yeah,
SMEs in particular. Who
yeah,
tells them
because
which standards they should follow? Yeah.
yeah, but also they need to acknowledge, and I'm overly generalizing here, but one of the interesting things about standards is that everybody has an opinion why it's not the right standard.
Yeah. There's a plethora
Especially,
of standards, isn't it?
yes,
There's
so
a plethora,
especially,
no?
yeah, and especially when you're talking to certain SMEs, we see that we still lack something, but that's one of the things that OASC is solving as well, that applying a standard sometimes demands a deep technical knowledge, which is not always ready on the market or in the budget of startups and SMEs. So I think there's a role there as well. And a third thing about this interoperability and SMEs is also that in crises, I don't think we will make major decisions on which standards to apply. It should be decided before and after. And during crises, we should be aware that a quick solutions, quick and dirty, might be more efficient and effective than going through the process. Are they following the right standard? Which means that we need to establish even more so a dialogue on interoperability, so that we, once a crisis or an opportunity is presenting itself, that we can rely on agreements which are already made. So it's about this in talking to each other and understanding where each and everybody is coming from, why interoperability is important for all parties involved. So it's this reaching common understanding, and also this vocabulary. And because it's not just about technical standards, it's also about using the same words for the same concepts and so on. So a lot of interesting work ahead of us.
Yes, thank you very much. Maybe going back to Devor, then what do you see the role of your organization, the Open and Agile Smart Cities, in supporting the different members of your network in choosing the right standards or learning from each other's experiences in terms of interoperability, avoiding vendor lock-in, working with the local SME communities? What are you doing? What do you see your organization doing in that respect?
Yeah, so essentially what we do is we build a consensus, a global consensus around, so we don't produce standards, right? We just look at them, select ones that are useful, and then get a consensus from cities on mechanisms that will, they agree on, and therefore will help them exchange solutions amongst them. So it's it's a niche, let's say, approach, but I think it's a very important work. So in a sense, it's doing the plumbing that is needed, and allowing also the humble plumbing, as they say. It allows you to scale up impact, right? So and let's take the COVID-19 example. So let's say a city has a way of properly addressing a certain challenge related to this crisis, well, now other cities can just take that solution, scale it up, and adopt it more easily. I'll take an example of a system that was built in Italy to manage the crisis there, or applied there. Because it's built on standards, it's quite easy and straightforward for other cities to adopt that and then start using that system that connects kind of all the data sources, the labs and the hospitals and all that stuff to manage the crisis in this particular example. But it also onboards the knowledge base that Italy has in this instance, because they've been at it 10 days longer than we have. They've been at it 20 to 30 days longer than other parts of the world. So there are patterns in there that save lives, right? And so the quicker you can onboard such a system, the more lives you save, literally, right? So in that sense, I think that's a really good case of why it matters to, like Bart says, to do the work now. And okay, it's a crisis, let's use whatever is there and work with that and not have discussions on the interoperability itself. Use it, run it, and do it. Now, what is, I think, lacking often also in this perspective, it's always a discussion of, okay, you have supranational levels, you have national levels, regional levels, and then the cities. And if you see the way a properly set up city like Ghent, who has, has their antennas in the local ecosystem, is involved in a plethora of ways, have their open data stuff together, have the real time, it's all there, right? If you want a kind of a good canvas to kind of do a city-related startup, Ghent's a great place. Everybody knows that. Yet they are also struggling, right? They're also struggling, even though they have the scale and they have all the specializations, of profiles who can attend to certain topics. Can you imagine what it is for a small community somewhere in Europe where, there's only 2,000-3,000 citizens? The virus doesn't discriminate, right? So the message there is they need guidance, they need a best practice and something that they can go ahead and implement. And that's where, this elicitation of what works and getting a city to test it, and then getting kind of the stamp, let's say, of a city saying, well, yes, this seems to work in this context, and then other or smaller scale places that don't have time to invest in all these innovation and testing and these kind of processes can go ahead and adapt. And that saves an enormous amount of cost, because in a sense, all these technological improvements and digital transformation are about saving the cost of the problem-solving tasks that a city has. It's the problem-solving entity we all have is the city. It takes care of all the stuff where we live. So it saves the cost there. So if you can take away the cost of innovation and just replace it by cost of replication and learning and all that kind of stuff for the communities, I think you can transform much quicker and at a larger scale as a result. And I think in these times of crisis, like Bart says, it puts the magnifying glass on it. So the message will be contact us. I've put my email address also in the
yes, very good.
Reach out to us. We're building this catalog. There's a kind of an onboarding process. We're focused on COVID-19 stuff now, but basically any kind of digital solution that has been, implemented somewhere in at least one city or region. We're cataloging that, so get in touch and see if we can help you in some way. But yeah, that's.
Thank you very much, Devor. Maybe just another question to Bart before we go towards the conclusion of this conversation. Because Devor gave the examples of the regions and the cities in Italy. I suppose this was Lombardy and Veneto, which have adopted solutions that were standards-based, and then therefore other cities in Europe could use the same solutions, also benefiting from the 10 days or 15 days advance of those regions in the epidemics, such that they had more data, and other regions could benefit from that and save lives, literally. Do you have yourself examples in the crisis, but also beyond the crisis, of good collaboration between the city of Ghent and other cities in terms of smart solutions? Because indeed, Ghent is one of the most advanced, is probably a best practice. But have you learned from others, or have you made your knowledge available to other cities in terms of smart solutions?
Yeah, we did. So, but even before the crisis, we worked together through European projects with other cities on a variety of topics. So, for instance, we are active in the SCORE project, where we work with challenges and open source. We are active, for instance, in the Polyvisu project, where we take data towards good visualizations for policy making and so on. So we have this project-based collaboration. And then we have the networks like OASC and Eurocities, where we feel that with an ongoing conversation on the different challenges, we know, okay, we are facing something that could be useful for Barcelona, or I know the city of Eindhoven, they were dealing with this last year. So there's this personal connection. Another thing which is working quite well, I think, is that just by publishing the data you have a base of comparison. And this is something that was happening as well during the crisis, when we were talking about contamination and rates of people being sick. But it was also very interesting to see, that's the data professional speaking now, how different the measurements were and how this influenced the perception. So this is also something that we can take into the public debate, that clear definitions are crucial, because the machine learning needs to be on the same type of data, and then you can replicate. So it shows again how multi-layered this interoperability approach is. And then also just by having somebody in your peer network that you can pick up the phone and talk, okay, how are you dealing with this? So you need a certain level of trust to admit to each other which things did not work. And so, it's on all these different levels that now we reap the rewards of the time and the energy we invested in those networks and those projects, which are very valuable for the products, like the MIMS and OASC. They're a great way to work towards interoperability. But it's also that you understand what challenges people and other cities are facing. And when we talk about SMEs and the relationship and the collaboration between SMEs, we notice that a lot of the issues are the same all over the world. So it would be very interesting to see how an initiative like yours with the European SMEs, that this kind of conversation between cities can also happen between the SMEs who are working in different areas with different cultural backgrounds. So I think it's necessary, because when we look at networks, the strength of a network, 80% of the traffic is very local, but the strength of the network is being decided by the links between those local hubs. And I think that's where people and organizations like ours are crucial.
Yeah, and I find it interesting what you say also about these European projects that you have been involved in, because indeed, when we are speaking at the city level, we know that that the European Union doesn't have any competence at that level, because these are two different layers. But what we get through the European Union sometimes is opportunities to get, even funding opportunities to connect different experiences that happen at the local level. And so, because we have a common project with, we set up a certain research challenge perhaps, and together with other cities, we can meet those cities, which otherwise we will probably not do. We will probably not establish those links that ultimately create the trust, as you say, and that obviously also help the cities to work in a structured way together, like organizations like Eurocities or the OASC from Davor is doing. And these are, things we have to learn. Now, I think we should be also going towards the conclusion because of the time. I'd like to have a last statement, maybe 1 minute, just to sum up what are your main takeaways and things that you wanna convey to our audience. First from Devor and then from Bart. So Devor, would you like to give us your last statement?
Yeah, I think this this kind of a trying time that we have now in addressing this crisis can also present an opportunity in terms of finding a common way in which these challenges can be addressed in terms of the interoperability. And I think the way it's or at least we are set up is that there is an emphasis that is definitely SME friendly. The interoperability points in cities are the same for big providers and for SMEs, and SMEs can partner with us just like bigger providers can. So in that sense, I think the challenge now is to kind of filter, I think, on basis, and that's knowledge that will come after the crisis, on what has worked and what has not. But the solutions that have found the footing somewhere and have seemed to work, I think there's a great opportunity now to scale it up, because the way the pandemic or at least the herd immunity seems to be evolving is that there won't really be kind of this relative downtime in between waves. It seems that the recovery and preparation stage for the next wave, in the darkness of winter, if you want to call it that, will be mixed up very much. So we'll need to kind of learn and recover and build up the capacity for when it comes, because I think that that's the picture that is becoming more and more clear to most people. So get involved. Let's try and see how we can shape that together. We are partnering also with the Digital SME Alliance on this. So let's figure out a way forward, cities and European companies together.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll go to Bart and take over this opportunity while you do your last words to ask you to reply to a question we got from a viewer, Anya Wei, in the Facebook Live. She's asking an interesting question. I think you were probably well placed to reply. She's talking about if you see any best practice and experiences in how you bridge the gap between cities and SMEs in terms of time frame for planning. She's saying SMEs are often very dynamic, very fast, agile, because they need to be competitive. Whereas cities, of course, have a longer planning. I mean, it's something you have been kind of addressing before when you spoke about procurement practices in the cities. But do you have any concrete view on this, which the viewer was asking about?
Thank you. So I'll answer the question first. Thank you for this. Yeah, it's true that we notice that there's and it's also a big source of frustration when we talk to SMEs. Yeah, why does everything needs to be so slow? So it's a recurring challenge. But it's true. But I think one of the solutions that we are putting forward is like to when we start communicating towards the ecosystem, it's more okay. This is the digital roadmap. These are the things that we are planning ahead. So it allows SMEs to see how we are stringing different solutions together. Another approach is also a very valid one. What we are seeing in, for instance, Antwerp, is how they are putting out challenges. And then the framework is quite clear in which how the interaction between the SMEs and the government will be. of course, when we're talking in a crisis situations, we see that all deals are off the table and anything goes. There, I think, yeah, we had some ideas on the roadmap, but yeah, we'll see how the crisis will affect us. But I think the key is, and this is also part of my conclusion, that we need to keep investing in the continuous dialogue between city, urban planning, and SMEs. What are their challenges? We need to also learn to think outside of the box. A relationship between an SME and a city government or any other government doesn't need to be restricted to we have a product and you can buy. It can also be you have a certain expertise which might be very useful in this agile thinking that we need in crisis situations. So I think, and that's the second part of my conclusion, is that we need to use this crisis also as an opportunity and like really evaluate which are the lessons learned, and we need to act quite fast because it's, as Davor is saying, we are not sure how much downtime there will be. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think it's very clear, Bart. Thank you very much. I like very much this concept that the city is not just buying a product or a service from a company. Here, what we are talking about is really creating a community, creating a long-term partnership where, you know, the thing can be just, you know, the company has the knowledge and they want to make it available to the city, which needs this expertise. So this is often what we say when we speak about European digital SMEs, because they go into partnership with other companies that use the technologies. Yes, these are clients. These buy a service or they buy a product, but they don't just buy something from the shelves. They buy a long-term partnership. They buy, you know, an expertise into how to digitize, how to change business models, how to create growth and competitiveness in the long term. And this is, for us, this is a quite important concept, because these companies are not like the multinationals, the GAFA, no, the Google, Microsoft, and so on, which will only sell you a product or a service. These companies, these IT European SMEs, will give you, you know, a partnership. And this is the model which we are trying to convince everyone is the model of Europe, the model that will work for the future of our economy. Let me conclude also by reminding everyone, especially our viewers, that next Friday we will have another online streaming conversation, and we will talk about artificial intelligence. We will interview some of the most advanced SMEs in Europe in artificial intelligence, selling artificial intelligence, but also using artificial intelligence for different sectors. We'll talk to policymakers about these, members of the Parliament, of the European Parliament. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I would like to thank once again, they tell me it's going to be next Thursday, not next Friday. Anyway, we'll announce that on our Facebook, Twitter, and social media channels. Let me thank once again Davor and Bar for the very nice participation. It's been very interesting, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you,
Thank you. Bye-bye.